Hello, Robert here, fact-checking stories that scare you. And this one is completely fictional and made up. This is just a story by some really silly person, or someone who doesn't know anything about astronomy. The story is that Uranus, Neptune and Saturn are going to be aligned on the 28th of June, and that this is going to cause devastation to Earth. Now, if you just look at the sky chart for that day, so these people presumably didn't know how to bring up a sky chart, then they're nowhere near each other. This is way across the sky. This is a third of the sky apart or something. That's Uranus, that's Neptune, and that's Saturn. They probably don't know really what these things are either. Saturn is the only one of those that is visible. It could hardly be a visible conjunction, even if they were inlined, because Neptune and Uranus, they are far too faint to see. It's just possible that someone with very acute vision, with a very dark adapted eye, on the darkest possible location, like some remote desert far from any light, could be able to see Neptune in a very favourable situation. It's just the very limit of what is possible for the human eye. So we're not talking about something that anyone can expect to see from a city, or indeed most astronomers from anywhere. You'd just be seeing the faintest little speckle that you'd hardly distinguish from the night sky itself. Anyway, and conjunctions are harmless anyway. We get lots of conjunctions every year. They're just a photo op. So people have a strange idea about how gravity works. They think that if one planet is in front of another one, it'll sort of focus the gravity and sort of zoom at you or something. It's kind of pretty obvious. If you put your finger up and point at the moon, you don't get a sudden tug on your eye from the moon. It just doesn't happen, because gravity doesn't work like that. Your finger doesn't focus the gravity from the moon. You might get a little bit mixed up with gravitational lensing. That's a very, very subtle effect. You need something as heavy as the sun, and even then it's quite a subtle effect. It doesn't increase the gravitational pull in any noticeable way. So no, conjunctions don't do anything. What the planets do is have a minute effect on the tides. If you work out the details, this is the most sensitive thing that the Earth does by way of responding to planets. So it responds to the sun and to the moon. The lunar tides are by far the highest, and how big the tides are depends on how big the moon is in the sky. So you can work out, it just depends on the density of the object and its visual apparent diameter. The sun is the same visual diameter as the moon, but it's less dense, and that's why the sun tides are weaker than the moon tides. Now, the Venus is the only planet that ever becomes visible to people with very acute vision. Can see a little crescent if they look at Venus in a favourable opposition with naked eye, mainly young people. And you can see it with binoculars if you've got a reasonable eyesight. Then you might be able to see a crescent. I can't, my eyesight isn't good enough to see it as a crescent with binoculars. So it's the largest visually in the sky, so it has the biggest tides, and its tides are about 0.5 millimeter of tides for every 10 meters of lunar tides. And then if you add up all the other planets, another 0.2, another fifth of a millimeter. So you've got 0.7 millimeters. If you had all the planets were lined up, then the total tides from them all would be 0.7 millimeters for every 10 meters of tides. Tide is usually, that's quite a big tidal range, 10 meters. It's very rare to have a range that big. If you're somewhere like Florida, it's just a few meters range. And so you're talking about a much smaller fraction, a tiny fraction of a millimeter difference in the tides, when you have all the planets aligned. You can't measure it. Nobody measures. It's beyond measuring. So, and tides, and it's not going to do anything to earthquakes, it's not going to do anything to volcanoes. So you can completely ignore all these conjunction stories. If it says you are in danger from a conjunction, nonsense. This person does not understand astronomy, doesn't understand the most basic ideas of gravity. Anyone who says conjunctions can harm you, then it is utter, absolute tosh, nonsense, codswallop, nincompoops. They're silly people, they just don't have a clue, or at least they don't have a clue about astronomy. They may be sensible in other areas, but it's just utter codswallop. And the other thing is that this chap claims it's a Nostradamus prophecy. Go and look. He is the only person in Google. Go and look. There's only one person who says that, who makes this quote. This is the story that is scaring some of our members. So if you scroll down, then if you look for the Nostradamus prophecy, it says, he puts it in quotes, natural phenomena will take their toll, it will be impossible to deny climate change. Remember, climate change was a new thing in the 1970s. Nostradamus is 16th century. He knew nothing about climate change. There's no way that Nostradamus could have done a quatrain about climate change. It wasn't even a phrase. Tornadoes, volcanic eruptions. Tornadoes are not much of a thing in Italy. That's more of a US thing. Volcanic eruptions and hurricanes. Hurricanes again. You don't get hurricanes in Italy. I very much doubt if there is a Nostradamus prophecy about hurricanes. We just don't get them in Europe because they travel from east to west, so they make landfall in the United States. We don't get hurricanes in Europe because they don't travel in our direction. They form the Atlantic. Sometimes we get very strong storms. We don't get hurricanes. So there's no way that Nostradamus talked about hurricanes or tornadoes, very unlikely, and certainly not about climate change. So that is just totally made up. Nostradamus didn't say any of those things. And you can be pretty confident because most Nostradamus prophecies are made up. Anyway, when you get someone saying this is a Nostradamus prophecy, 9 times out of 10, Nostradamus didn't even say those words. In the remaining 1 out of 10, he did say those words, but they've hugely misrepresented what he meant by them. So this is the only dated prophecy from Nostradamus, and this shows that he could not see our future. He could not see our future. Nostradamus could see nothing. He said in July 1999, a possibly appeasing pope will in some way stir up a leader with Mongol or possibly Lombard connections, with the result that a previously raging war will accidentally flare up. Now, that's not actually what he says in words. It's very, very obscure. He says, year 1999, 7 months, from the sky will come the great king of terror, bringing life back to life, the great king of the Angkor. Before and after Mars reigns by good fortune. But this was the best understanding of it by people who have made their life work to try and understand the enigmatic things that Nostradamus says. But you can see from the connect from that, and there's nothing in this quatrain about a pope, but there's nothing you talk about great king of terror. It could mean a million different things. Great king of Angkor. But Angkor is an anagram of the Mongols, and as one guess, and possibly appeasing pope, and something in that indicates that it's a pope. I'm not quite sure which, and so on. So that's how these quatrains work. But whatever he meant, then there was, and then Mars would mean more. Previously raging war, Mars reigns. That means there's a war before and after the Great King of Terror, bring it back to life. And so, anyway, whatever it means, it didn't happen in July 1999. Nothing happened, even remotely. Nobody in studying Nostradamus' prophecies came up with anything as a prediction that actually happened. So they're useless for prediction. And there's no reason to suppose that Nostradamus could see the future at all, in our time anyway. So you can just ignore any Nostradamus prophecy, just ignore it. So, is there anything else I need to say about this? No, that was a different thing. Here we are. And that's it, I think. Oh yes, The Dark. So, there's a Netflix series called The Dark, which is built around a fictional nuclear power station disaster in Germany. But if the series work writers for Dark thought there would be a nuclear power station disaster in Germany, then what would the first thing you do if you are a scriptwriter and you think there's going to be a nuclear power station disaster? Do you say, oh, that's perfect opportunity, that is the date that we should schedule the launch of our television series? Would that be the first thought that springs to your mind? Oh yes, there's going to be a nuclear disaster, so let's write a TV story about it and let's schedule our TV series to be launched on the very day of the disaster. That's not how you're going to think. If you think that's going to happen, you would say, what's going to cause this disaster? Oh, well, it's going to cause such and such is going to cause it. How can we stop it? And then you would warn the German authorities, be careful. If you do such and such, you're going to get a nuclear disaster. Like with Chernobyl, the reason it had a disaster was because they did an unsafe experiment and they didn't realize it was unsafe and they removed various safeties. So if you'd known that was what's going to happen, you would warn them. You say to the Chernobyl technicians, don't do that operation. Just look at this. Just take a little look at this detail which you haven't noticed, and you will realize that what you're about to do is not safe. So that is surely what, if anyone knew there was going to be a nuclear power station disaster on June the 27th, then they would, and they've written it out in great detail in the script for this fictional movie, then they would tell the people who run this power station what to do to avoid it. So I'm saying this, particularly we have many members in our group who are autistic. If you're autistic, then it's often very difficult to make a difference between fiction and reality. Even when you know it's fiction, even when you know it's a script written, still there's something in the way in which you think, if you're autistic, which makes it very difficult to make that separation and say, this is fictional, so it can't happen in real life. So that's why I'm really belabouring this point and saying, this is fictional, this is not real, this is script. This will not happen in real life. People have the ability to imagine fictional scenarios, like Hogwarts. So most of you, even if you're autistic, you're not going to think that Hogwarts is a real place, or that magic is real. That seems to be a step too far. And so it's the same as that. It's like Harry Potter. It's fictional in the same way as Harry Potter. This is not going to happen. It is just, and this is commonly done, it just makes it a little bit more zing for the people watching the movie, and the movie has an event on the very day they're watching it. And then if you're not autistic, if you are just quite imaginative and you enjoy scary things, and that gives you a little extra reason of excitement that you are watching this movie on the very day that it's supposed to happen in real life. You know it's not really going to happen, but you enjoy the kind of feeling that comes from, you wouldn't enjoy it in reality, but you enjoy the scary movie because we like scary movies so long as we know it is fictional. So that is why series writers do this sort of thing. It's just made up. It does not mean that anything is going to happen on June the 27th. So, and that's it. So hopefully that is enough for you, if you're scared of this, to not be scared tomorrow. Nothing is going to happen. The 27th is fictional, the 28th is just someone capitalizing on and making up a non-existent alignment and making up an entirely made up quatrain that was not written by Nostradamus. And in any case, Nostradamus has never predicted anything. The things that he claim he has predicted are made up after the event, most often. The ones that seem to be accurate. Like the famous 9/11 one with 2 iron birds, or whatever it was, the iron birds, that was made up. Nostradamus did not do any quatrain about iron birds. Just someone wrote a little verse after 9/11 and then said, and then put it in quotes and wrote, Nostradamus said this, and they were telling a lie. And that is very common. That is fake news. So hopefully this helps you. And again, just a reminder, do like and subscribe. If you want to hear more of this, do join our Facebook group. Especially helpful if you are good at fact-checking in a rigorous way, or you have expertise yourself that you can contribute to help people, like tell them things that you know from your own expertise that will help with their fears. Please don't guess when answering people in Doomsday Debunked. Either don't guess that it's okay if you don't know, don't guess that it's not okay. Only answer if you are able to fact check. If you don't know, then what you can do is just reassure people, help people, try and tag some debunker that you know is able to fact check. And it's really useful to have people who are good at reassuring scared people. And also, if any of you are psychologists, that's very useful as well. Just helping, guiding people. You're obviously not doing the psychology, but or help a mental health worker in some sense. Then just to give people some help in navigating the mental health system, because some people have problems finding a psychiatrist and knowing how to talk to them in the right kind of way and so on. Then that can be very helpful as well. And then you may have tips and ways of that you can share that are generally kind of obvious things that you can tell to people that and ways that things they can try out, things they can use if there isn't a psychiatrist available for them. Anyway, so I'll stop that now.